Hello, reality sandwich community. Kyle, one of your favorite conscious agents, back with another amazing Share Your Experience interview. Joined today by a wonderful guest, and if she wouldn't mind introducing herself, would love to introduce you to the reality sandwich community.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Zipporah. I'm with High Tantra. And so what I do is I teach people how to microdose with cannabis and other ancestral medicines as part of my work with Tantra. And so infusing it with tantric therapies, coaching, and ceremonies.
As this is the Share Your Experience series, I'd love to dive in really to your first introduction to plant medicines, wellness, tantra. What started you really on this journey?
Oh, my first introduction to psychedelics.
Or plant medicine, what's kind of started you on this career path and your
Yeah.
current, mission that you share?
Okay. Okay. So I was working in tech in San Francisco. This was back in between 2012 and 18. And during the final year that I was there, 2017, I just realized that I just didn't want to continue living in the lifestyle that I was living. I couldn't afford the city, first of all. And I was just hustling and grinding and just overworking myself. And I knew that I had a lot of ancestral things to heal. I also had a calling to go back. I say go back, but I never actually lived there. Colombia, that's where my both of my parents are from. I never had the experience of living abroad or even living where my roots are from. And so it wasn't an impulsive move. I planned it for about a year, and then I went over there, and I knew that I was going to be looking into working with ayahuasca and other ancestral medicines. And so I really dug deep with in Colombia, ayahuasca is called yahe. Yahe is the masculine version of aya, and it's a grandfather. Ayahuasca is the grandmother. And so I joined a ayahuasca or a yahe community of Colombian healers. And they did it every 2 weeks. I didn't go that often, but I would go every now and then and do the work. And then to be completely transparent, with yahe, with ayahuasca, it was usually a hit or miss, and most often a hit or a miss. And so I would take it really hard on myself because I was thinking that I was blocked. How is it that all these other people and all these other Colombians, that this is their first time doing any type of psychedelic and they're having these profound experiences, and I was just going for a night of meditation and just sitting there and writing down my intentions. I wasn't doing anything. I knew that I was going for something, and in the long term, it was helping me. But I knew it wasn't my medicine at the time. And so I started exploring a little bit more, and I got into mushrooms. And I feel like for me, psilocybin is something that always hits me in like that profound way that I need it to each and every time. And so that just started my journey with the rest. And I'll just stop there.
Beautifully put. Curious, you weren't, I guess, unlocking the healing, or what was that experience when you saw everyone around you having these profound medicine experiences, and how did you
Oh,
kind of
man.
discover why it wasn't affecting you?
Yeah, it felt more, I felt hopeless. I felt like, I just made the trek all the way over here, and I'm doing the things that I think are on the right path to exploring consciousness more and doing the healing. So why am I not feeling anything? And so it kind of added to feeling that I was more broken.
Gotcha. And how did you take that and discover which plant medicine was right for you? What was that journey towards finding the healing you were looking for?
Um, well, I realized that, each medicine is not always going to be for that person at that time. It doesn't mean it's not gonna help them later on, because ayahuasca has certainly helped me on later on in other ceremonies, um, but most of the time it didn't. So what I tell people is like, keep finding what your medicine is. Keep exploring and experimenting, because for me, I found that psilocybin was. And then when I hadn't touched cannabis in 15 years, and that's a whole other story. But when I started using cannabis again, after having a 15-year dieta, then that's when everything opened up for me. And I said, this is my medicine right now. I'm having the ayahuasca-like journeys and visions, third eye visions. And that's when I started working with it in a more spiritual way and really taking it seriously. And so, and you know, I've done Bufo twice. It didn't do anything for me. I have our friend Kyle in Inner Circle. He says that I'm Bufo proof, which I thought was so funny because it's supposed to be the most powerful psychedelic on earth. Mm-hmm. And for me, it just like gives me, my heart. And it gives me like this little anxiety attack, but it doesn't do anything. So it just means it's not my medicine right now. Doesn't mean I'm going to completely write it off either.
Right. You have to feel called, I feel, to the medicine, to these plants. I'd love to, you mentioned briefly I'd love to hear about your first time trying and using cannabis. And then it sounds like you took a 15-year tea break and now you kind of have it integrated into your whole programming. So I'd love to hear that journey and explore, that particular plant medicine experience.
Sure. So I was introduced to cannabis maybe when I was 15. I didn't really understand the hype of it. It was a boyfriend that put me onto it. And I only did it every once in a while just because it was a social thing and out of being, I don't know, just being part of the ritual of passing the blunt. And it wasn't until maybe like when I was 19 that I was smoking it with some coworkers one night in Philly. I was raised in the suburbs of Philly, but this time I was in the actual city, Philly, smoking with my coworker and his Jamaican roommate. And they were saying, oh, this is some good shit. This is really strong. And I'm just like, okay. 'Cause they said it was from Jamaica. Well, we were sitting watching, I don't know, maybe The Simpsons. It was one winter night. And all of a sudden, I feel my heart palpitating. And I start breathing differently. And so my friend says next to me, he said, hey, are you okay? And I said, I don't know. And I start trying to breathe deeper and I'm realizing that my throat is closing. And so I'm telling him, I can't breathe. And the Jamaican guy says, go grab some Kool-Aid and add a lot of sugar to it. As if that was supposed to help. And so they did. So my friend got the Kool-Aid with extra sugar, gave it to me. I could barely gulp because in my mind and in my body, it felt like this was constricting. And so I was, and so you could literally hear the audible sounds like me trying to get it down. It didn't do anything. And I started feeling myself like getting weaker. And so I went outside on the porch. It's the dead of winter. I figured that the cold air could help me. And I go out there. And at this point, because of the constriction of oxygen, my knees gave out and I fell on the floor. And all I could think was, my parents are going to find out I died from marijuana. And I was feeling all this shame and remorse. And then I faded away and I passed out. I lost consciousness. Luckily, I woke up. My friends were right about to do CPR on me. And I was able to sit up and put my arms up to be able to get more oxygen in. And I was like, what the hell was that? And they were frozen and they were shook. But out of like the shock, I also started laughing because I was so happy that I got my life back. And then I think it was maybe just a few minutes later that it started up again. The heart palpitation, the constriction. I said, no, you got to rush me to the ER. And so I went to the ER. It was from midnight until 6 a.m. that I was there, and they hooked me up to, I guess, to the IV with the things up my nose for air, for oxygen. And that's when the doctors knew that I had cannabis in my system because they took a urine test to see if I was pregnant before putting me in a CAT scan. And that was the first time. And then because I'm so stubborn, and I was like, there's no way I could be allergic to a plant because that's what they told me. You're probably allergic to it. Maybe it was laced. And so I got a different batch and I made it in brownies, not knowing that that's an even stronger effect. Oh my goodness. Well, I went again to the ER and luckily I had really good insurance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But now in retrospect, now that I understand why everything happened the way it did, I had gone through some pretty traumatic event and I didn't get therapy for it. And I held it all inside. It happened that same year, a few months prior. And so when I went to smoke the plant, it manifested and it triggered a physical ailment such as an anxiety attack, a panic attack. I have never experienced these attacks ever in my life. And so that's why I associated it to having an allergic reaction. And I thought it was fatal. And so I didn't want to think. At the time, I didn't, like I said, I didn't put the two and two together about my trauma. But that's what happened. And that's why I stopped smoking it, because I was, if the doctors can't even help me, then let me just knock that off.
And now you've kind of come full circle with it. So what was that 15-year break and how did you reintroduce yourself to the plant?
Yeah, I was living in Medellin, Colombia during COVID, the pandemic. And it was so locked down there, I wasn't even allowed to bring guests into my condo. And so I found an escape and I went to San Francisco, where I used to live, and I was house sitting for a friend. And I was living in the Mission District, and I was dating somebody at the time, and he offered me some, I think they were like THC mints. And I was like, okay, well, I have a marijuana trauma. I know you work in the hospital system, so do you know CPR? And he said, actually, I do. And I said, wonderful. I think I'm ready to face this all over again, because I had already, when moving to Colombia, I joined a Wim Hof meetup community group. I was going, we were going on top of a mountain and doing Wim Hof in a cold river. I was learning more about meditation and how to calm my heart rate through breath work. And so I felt like I was ready to put myself through that situation, and helping myself through it through breath work. And so what happened was, he gave me the mint and I had a little bit, and then I had a little bit more, and I felt the anxiety symptoms coming on. And I just reminded myself that, if I breathe through my nose, I'm getting oxygen up to my brain, everything's okay. Just talking to myself that way. And what happened was, when I realized that I had gone a little bit too far with the medicine and I crossed this invisible line, that's when I had to go lay down and go through an ayahuasca-like journey. And so that's when I would put on the music. I would just close my eyes and allow myself to be taken. And that's when I started having very mystical experiences. And I would ask my friends who are avid cannabis smokers or taking edibles, like, do you ever go through these experiences that are very psychedelic? And they would just say no. And I would say, that's interesting. Why am I going through it? And so I started doing this every Sunday, like church, and just like doing these journeys for myself and getting my playlist ready, the right frequencies. And then I started having messages from my ancestors talking to me, making sense of a lot of the things that I've done in my life.
Beautiful. I feel like, cannabis really gets left out of the psychedelic plant medicine conversation, that almost they put cannabis in a separate category, but yourself and, a few other guests have shared their psychedelic experiences on cannabis and using it ritualistically like that. And again, I feel we should be uplifting that conversation.
Right. The majority of cannabis, or anybody, like the whole world, doesn't even realize that cannabis is psychedelic, let alone the people that smoke it, because it really is all about intention setting, the space that you create, the energy, and what kind of environment you're in, obviously. But yeah, me having that, let's say, courage to face my death, because it was, for me, it was death. that I was facing, life or death. If you can't breathe for more than how many minutes, you're dead, you're brain dead. And so, yeah, I think that's why I'm also doing what I do, because I've been on that side where I feared it for so many years, so much that I didn't even touch it. And now I'm able to help those people that experience the same, whether it's panic attacks, paranoia, or just have shame. I'm able to help them get through that and then have an enlightening experience because of it.
Could you walk me through your ritual with cannabis when working with clients and how you integrate that into the Tantra stuff and your other protocols?
Well, I have a lot of different offerings with cannabis and Tantra, but something that I've been doing lately for the past few months is I've been doing my high Tantra coaching, which is part coaching, story work, and part ritual, very ceremonial. And so I take whatever their intentions are, whatever their goals are for themselves for this session, and then I create some journal prompts for them to, once they're on the call with me, to write down in a sober state. And so we get them, thinking about more about what they're coming forth with in the session and writing down some reflective thoughts. And then we open up the space and then we connect with Mary in a very special technique that I like to teach people. And I teach people how to use only a little bit. That's why I call it a microdose, because it's only smoking a little bit and then getting right into it. And then they put on their blindfold. And this is a virtual thing. They put on their blindfold and get comfortable in their room as long as I can see them. And then we start with the breathwork journey, which involves high frequency music, and it's taking them through wherever they need to go, but we're also breathing at the same time. And it's not your average, it's not the typical, well, so there's different styles of breath work that people do and that I do as well, but I kind of let it be intuitive, because with cannabis, there's really no need to breathe. So, because I love doing holotropic breath work in my big ceremonies with groups where we have hours to go in to this field. But for the virtual sessions, there's no need to be very, there's no need to do the intense breath work, because cannabis and the breath work is already such a alchemical process that the body will show you how it wants to breathe. And I prefer to do what I call tantric breathing, which is deep inhales through the nose and exhales through the mouth, making an audible sound sometimes and allowing your body to move. So now we're using the tantric elements of breath, sound, movement, and awareness. And so if you ever heard of light language can be this like language that people speak in tongues. But light language isn't only that. Light language could be channeling words. It could be channeling music or song. For me, I discovered that my light language is my breath, is when I breathe and allow my sounds to penetrate the person through the music. And I think that's what gives the person permission to really allow themselves to breathe even more. And then after that, during the session, after that, when we come back, we do a little bit more reflective, and usually they end up getting all of their conundrums or problems solved. They get higher perspective and they break through the limiting beliefs with the help of the medicine.
Did you educate yourself on the tantric work in Colombia, or how did you get introduced to that modality and now integrate it fully into your life?
I got introduced to Tantra when I was in San Francisco. I was dating somebody who was going through erectile dysfunction, and he had asked me to look into it because he needed, so I'm sure you're aware of Viagra, Cialis. He actually was using testosterone injections to get an erection. And he had been doing this for 15 years because he had suffered insomnia when he was younger. He went to the doc to get meds, and he prescribed him this medication without giving him all the warnings and side effects that could happen. And so that ended up happening to him. It didn't work when he went to have intercourse, and he didn't know what was happening. Later on, he realized it was the medication, but by then the damage was done already. It created a psychological roadblock. So there was nothing wrong with his member, but it wasn't, he was thinking, like, what happens is that you start thinking like the history is going to repeat itself. And so he was curious about Tantra, and I had a lot of sexual energy that back then I wasn't able to contain. And so when he put me onto this, I really started digging into it, finding different tantric rituals and practices, exercises that I could bring into the bedroom. And so we implemented it into our intimacy practice. And what ended up happening is that the sex became that much better. And over the course of a few months, with these injections, they come with their side effects too, just like Viagra, right? And if you have an erection for too long, like after sex, after he would ejaculate, he would go take a cold shower, and usually that did the trick. But if it didn't, he would lift weights. If that didn't help, one time it didn't work, he had to go to the hospital, because if you have blood flow for too long, you can lose your penis. And so that's not good for anybody. And so it's very dangerous, these medicines. They're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. And so what we ended up realizing is that he weaned himself off of using that because of the Tantra we were practicing. And so that's when I realized, holy shit, Tantra is the cure for erectile dysfunction. It's such a potent medicine of its own.
Beautifully put. That sounds like a great healing experience. I'm curious, again, now that you've kind of mastered this protocol, what are you finding with couples and people you work with out there? How do you integrate the plant medicine as well into particular teachings and rituals?
How do I integrate it with working with couples, you're saying? Well, when I do my Tantra workshops, which are very much a ceremony, because Tantra is like a collection of rituals and going about it in a very intentional way. Well, I teach them the same thing that I teach everybody else. We go through, depending on how much time we have. Sometimes I get booked for retreat, sometimes for just 1-day sessions. And so depending on the time, then I'll figure out how much of the dosage we're going to do. And then we go for it. And then we start the tantric practices, Then we start the tantric practices, and then it just becomes a whole different experience with cannabis in our being, and using it to awaken our senses and to feel more and be more in our body. It's a very somatic experience. So that's why Tantra and cannabis are very complementary. They go hand in hand. Tantra is also about expansion of consciousness and moving of energy. And so, one thing I want to say is, you do not need cannabis to practice Tantra. Not at all. That's not what I'm putting out there. I'm just trying to give people a different experience, a more elevated experience, where you could have very drastic changes in the practices if you were to incorporate plant medicine, and not just cannabis. It can also be with psilocybin, microdosing or macrodosing psilocybin, for instance. So it's just opening up people to the world of psychedelics and sexuality. Because sexuality is a very spiritual thing too, if people are able to tap into that. And so Tantra is about spiritual intimacy. And so it's a different world. But I feel like people are also more open to psychedelics now. And so what better way to show them how to have more incredible intimacy and lovemaking rituals?
Do you feel like there's a lack of intimacy out there in the world right now, and how are these plant medicines and your work, bringing us back and getting connected closer to people? Do you feel like technology or our diets or, whatever a lot of people are intaking now, I feel like there's a low vibration, influencing all of us. That's creating a lack of intimacy here.
Yeah. I think that, well, since we weren't ever taught on like real educational sexual conversations or on conscious relating, like our sex ed was a joke, and I wish we would have had more appropriate practitioners or educators to come into the school system to talk about the dangers of having sex with the wrong person, and how much suffering that can cause. So I have to go back to the childhood or teenage years, because that's where we learn about sex. And I think that the majority of us have learned through pornography or telling each other stories about what we did, like amongst friends. And the truth is, pornography is not, it's fake. They're actors. It's not real. It's degrading women. It's abusive. And it's showing men that they don't really have to work hard for it in order to turn a woman on. And we take about 40 minutes to warm up. So I feel like sex nowadays, and with like the whole casual sex movement, it's just, I think there's a lot of bad sex happening in the world. a lot more frequent sex, and a lot unsatisfying sex. When I say that for women, and also I think for men too, because it could be, men could get to orgasm a lot quicker than the average woman. But I also think that we're missing out on a lot of pleasure for not taking it slow, for not doing the courting process and skipping right over that, and using sex almost like a way to see if you're compatible first through physical intercourse. And so I guess what I want to say when it comes to couples, I think the day and day routine, I think a lot of couples may think that planning a evening to get intimate or for sex is unsexy, but it's not. I think putting it on the calendar is a really good idea, because the anticipation is also part of the foreplay. And I think creating rituals around your intimacy, like having the candles, having the mood lighting, and the incense, and the lingerie, putting on your favorite boxers or briefs, like all of that adds to it. Playing a game together, a card game, whatever you want. That's all part of the foreplay that we need. And I think that, to answer your question, these plant medicines allow us to drop more into our bodies so we can feel more pleasure, because pleasure is I would say it's like a spectrum. But more importantly, to drop into our hearts. I think a lot of people, especially me, have hardened our hearts from perhaps rejection or neglect, from ancestral stuff, from childhood stuff, from just living in the society. And I think that men more than women have their hearts closed. And so that's what these medicines help us do, is open them, allow us to express ourselves a lot easier, more fluidly, in a way that we're not able to when we're not on the medicines. I mean, that's why MDMA has become such a big thing with couples therapy. It's very heart opening, but so is cannabis, so is psilocybin if we use it in the right amounts. You take too much of psilocybin, well, you can't even talk. You have to lay down or go through your trip. So just taking the right amount and experimenting and finding the right dosage for you.
Well put. Prior to this conversation, you had brought up your work with Changa and wanting to, educate the community about that.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with the plant medicine, and
Okay.
again, I feel like it's one of those underrated, undiscovered rituals and medicines that people aren't, utilizing yet. So could you walk me through your discovery and your experience with that?
Yeah. So Changa, spelled Changa or Xanga, it's a smokable blend of herbs and it includes the ayahuasca vine. And so it's infused with DMT for that reason. And an Australian by the name of Julian Palmer is actually the one who created Changa to simulate the effects of ayahuasca in smokable form. And so it allows it to be a little bit more controllable and accessible in the experience. And the first time I had Changa was in 2021. And I have a friend. She's a very powerful medicine woman from Canada. She's French Canadian, and she has Native American roots, Mi'kmaq tribe. And so she offers Changa. And so I had known that she had done it for some of the women in my community. And so I went for my experience. And so this is in Playa del Carmen. At this time, I had already moved to Mexico. This is 2021, during the pandemic. Playa del Carmen in the Riviera Maya was more open than a lot of the world. And so a lot of digital nomads and travelers kind of went there to escape the madness. And so I had met her I had met her in the community, but we were also part of a women's retreat. And so it was then that I decided, okay, I'm ready to work with you. And so me and a friend went to her house, literally in the Mayan jungle. Okay. And so I get there and, she has her whole altar ready for it. It's a very ceremonial experience. I know most people can smoke Changa and they do it with a friend or this and that. But this was, I just want to highlight that this was very much a Changa ceremony. And so I can't recall what my intention was, but at that time, I have two experiences that I would love to share, and I'll go over them really quickly. But on this one, we were on the ground and we did a little breath work. And so it's administered through, there's different ways to smoke it, but the way that she and several facilitators do it is through a crack pipe. Okay. And so she got it ready and, you have to do the 3 hit. Have you ever smoked DMT?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a more gentle version of DMT. DMT hits you hard. This also hits you very hard, but I don't know. It's just a more softer entrance into the experience. And it might last just a little bit longer. Okay. And so, so now, I'm ready to do the 3 hits. And, with DMT, you can see everything just kind of crystallizing and the geometric shapes. Even when you have your eyes open, like people can start looking like clowns. For this, I didn't have my eyes open. I just did the 3 hits and then I went back. And when I went back in my journey, I went back and now I was naked. I was in some jungle. I don't know if it was the Amazon, but I was in nature surrounded by a female tribe. And they were doing their, I wish I would have brought mine here to the room, but they were using the plant leaves to like doing this ritual. They were performing a healing ritual with the shaking their what is it called? Like a ritual leaf rattles that all around me. And I'm just taking it all in. And it feels like I was transported into a different timeline, like maybe my ancestral self, because I did the 23andMe test and I have 40% of indigenous roots. And so I'm thinking it might've been then. And I just felt all this love and just this sisterhood of whatever reason why I was getting this healing ceremony. Like I was the main focus and I was in the middle and they were just saying their prayers and it was just so damn beautiful. I had never had an experience like that before. And so the beautiful thing about being facilitated such a powerful experience by a woman is that my friend Amma, she while I was there on the floor, she carried me and put me on her lap. And then she just started cradling me and singing to me with this angelic voice. And so now during the part where everything starts fading, all the multicolors and the vivid everything, I started feeling like I started getting grounded again to the 3D and hearing her singing to me. And it was very motherly and nurturing. And I just started bawling my eyes out and crying because it was such a beautiful experience. And it did empower me on where I was on my path. You know, I had just done a 30+ women's retreat and facilitated a conscious ceremony during it. It wasn't my retreat. I was just one of the facilitators. And it felt like a female tribe. And so it's really interesting that happened right after into my my Changa ceremony. And I almost said ayahuasca because Julian created it to be like the ayahuasca smokable form. But yeah, so that happened. And so it just gave me the reassurance that I was on the right path and to keep going. Because it was like the start of when I started working with cannabis in a ceremonial way. And so that was my first experience. Do you have any questions about that before I go to my second? Because the second
Just
one
very quickly, you know, besides the ayahuasca root that's in there, what is the other blend of herbs, if you know, or what is what is in that?
It's mimosa something. I don't remember their scientific words, the names. There's even blue lotus in there. There's a whole mix, and I don't have them memorized.
All right, we'll do our research. But yeah, let's talk about that.
I can give
how,
it to you right
how
after.
much time was between the first and second experience?
Okay, so I would say it was about 1.5 to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So can I go into it?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I had just gone, so even though I was living in Latin America, I would go into the US frequently to go on tours with my workshops, with my ceremonies. And I had just landed back in Mexico and we were in Tulum at this point. My friend Ama, who does these Changa ceremonies, she also puts on these big conferences called manifestivals where we get people from crypto, from tech, from space, shamanic people, healers, all under one roof. And we just have a 3-4 day conference. And then after that, a few of us from the conference, we got together, we rented this house in Tulum, and we were doing a bunch of ceremonies back to back. And with her ceremony on this particular time, my intention was, because now I was sharing Tantra work. I had learned about Tantra. I started taking it more seriously. I did a bunch of trainings and I started sharing the medicine because it worked for me and I was sharing with others what was working for me. And so they could have these amazing, beautiful psychedelic experiences as well in the Tantra container. So I wanted to know, and I get a lot of slack from teachers, like especially one of my Tantra teachers, like, don't mix Tantra with any medicines. It's a medicine of its own. And me thinking, well, I came to this, I told her I was coming to this training retreat specifically because I wanted to amplify my work and be able to have more knowledge on it, more professional knowledge aside from my own personal practice. And so, I respect what people think about the tantric traditions, but at the same time, I feel like this is the new earth, and shamans have their ancient traditions, and they'll say no cannabis, no this and that, but they won't really be able to give you a clear answer. If you really drill and ask them why, but why? Why isn't it that, can I ask the plant if it's okay? Because up until maybe a year or two ago, my shaman with my cannabis work was Santa Maria, Mary Jane. Like that's who I would train with. And I would get the downloads of what to do, how to refine my practices, how to make them better, how to make them more safer for people. And so my intention in this Changa ceremony was to know, am I still on the right path with this Tantra work that I'm doing and what's next for me? Okay, so now I'm in the middle of the circle, but now we have our friends around, maybe like just 6 of us. So it's me and Amma in the circle. And now she does her prayer, because when you're opening up these portals with any psychedelics, you are opening up yourself for things to come through, and it's not always of the light. And so it's really important for us to do the energetic and spiritual work to guard the space and our bodies, our temples. And so she had opened up the space, and then it was my turn. I made the intention. I actually put it on my third eye, the pipe, and I made the intention. And so this time when I went to go smoke it, and I did my 3 rounds, on my first experience, I went back and I felt naked, but I wasn't naked. This time I fell back and my shirt flung open somehow. And I do remember them putting something over me. And at that moment, I started going through these convulsions and just shaking like this. And I started having orgasms after orgasmic waves on the floor. And the energy was so powerful that it set the alarms off in the laundry room. We thought that it was a car alarm outside, but it was in the laundry room. And it was like, burr, and it wouldn't stop. And what machine does that? Usually it makes the few beeps and then it stops. There wasn't anything running. It set the alarms off from my orgasms. And in my mind, I had seen all these beautiful colors. Like it was more like light pinks and blues and whites. And I was seeing it felt like a goddess activation. And I want to say that I felt God, but it felt feminine. It's just what it was.
Goddess.
Yes, it really was. Yes. And I was being activated with, in retrospect, what it was, and I'll tell you right now, it was my full-blown Kundalini awakening. So for those that don't know, a Kundalini awakening is a spontaneous phenomenon that happens to people usually when their energy centers are balanced and open. Energy centers being our chakras. And so what happens is that they say that there's 1 or 2 serpents at the base of our spine at our root. One represents Shiva, which is divine masculine, and the other one Shakti, divine feminine. And so they start going up the channels, up, 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 up. If your chakras are blocked, then it can't move up. But I had been doing so much Tantra work through, my practices and working with others in the ceremonies back for an extended period of time, that I think that that's what caused this to happen. Also, the Changa triggered it. So it goes up, 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 up the crown into, now you're connected with divinity, with God. And so many people who do Kundalini yoga is so they can prepare their temples for this to happen, this phenomenon. A lot of people who do Kundalini yoga don't even know about Kundalini awakenings, interestingly enough. There's many people, like many humans, that will go through a whole lifetime and never experience this at all, or don't even know it exists. And so I felt really blessed that happened to me. It really confirmed for me that everything that I'm doing is working, because a year prior to that, maybe a year and a half prior to that, I didn't even know what Kundalini was. When I was doing my cannabis ceremonies, I kept getting the message, look into Kundalini, look into Kundalini. And so I was telling my friend, I need to find Kundalini yoga. And she was like, I'm a Kundalini yoga instructor. And I was like, perfect. And so I started taking private lessons with her, or sessions. Sorry to go on a tangent, but I think it's important when, she would come to my apartment and be prepared to give me the sessions, the yoga sessions. I would tell her, I'm like, look, I'm probably not going to be your average uh, client. Like, I'm going to smoke ganja because it's part of my practice and I want to see what there is for me. And so when she started leading me into Kundalini yoga session work and having me move my body in a circular manner like this and up and down, I started having streams of tears running down my eyes because that was what my body was already doing in my cannabis ceremonies. So I started realizing, like, wow, like that energy, that sexual energy, it's called Shakti. It's just life force. It's a pure sexual energy. Yeah. Like, yes. And a lot of us shut it down because of societal conditioning and the programming, the sexuality is bad. But if we're able to do this in very, safe containers and allow that movement to happen without resisting it, then we start doing some really weird and cool things, especially during mushroom trips. Like, that's when, our magicalness can activate. So going back to the Changa ceremony, that's what a Kundalini awakening is. And that's what happened to me with the DMT trip. And so, yeah, those are
how do you come down from an incredible, kind of experience high like that? And what was your post integration period like, after that ritual?
Oh, and during the come down of the Changa ceremony, I started coming back to my senses. And again, she was singing to me and I started waking up and the alarm was going off and then it stopped. And I was like, was that me? And I was like, beep, beep. And so it's completely supernatural. And so the integration experience after that, I didn't have formal integration. And that is something that I write my things down in my journal and I tell myself, okay, this is what we're going to focus on this week. But it wasn't never rigid or, I wasn't disciplined back then in the way that I should have been with the integration. And I'll be honest and say that. But I took it as a very empowering experience. And it also just solidified that, the work I'm doing, it's I don't like to say good or bad, but it was making a difference. And it made a difference in me so much that it gave me this like beautiful, holy, orgasmic experience that made me just come into it really did feel like a tantric goddess activation and awakening. And so that's what I like to give for others in my Tantra ceremonies and my body work and the work that we do. I like to, because there's a difference between Kundalini awakening and activations. Kundalini activations is when people start to feel that energy, but some people use it interchangeably with awakening, and it's not correct. An awakening is a phenomenon that can take several years or these type of experiences with psychedelics for it to activate.
How often do you now continue to work with Changa or recommend it to people?
I haven't done it since. I am going back to the Riviera Maya in 2 weeks to go work with some clients and do some retreats. And preparing for this episode, I was thinking that I think it's actually time. And so I am going to ask my friend, Amma, if she'll give me a ceremony. And if anybody listening to this wants a ceremony with her, if you're ever, going to Cancun or Tulum and you want to take a trip over to Playa del Carmen, then I already asked her for consent. She would be happy to facilitate a ceremony for you.
Beautiful. Where can people follow you? Where can they follow your work? How can they book courses with you? And what's exciting? What's inspiring you lately? And you're excited about what's coming up?
Yeah. So what I'm excited about what's coming up is that in a couple weeks, I'm launching, me and my business partner, we're launching a course called Respark. And so it's a tantric sexual mastery course for couples. And it comes with 15 modules. And it's accompanied by 2 different products, a sextract tincture that you put under your gums that have some mushroom strains, not magic mushrooms, but more like the libido enhancing ones, and gummies. So a sextract tincture and a sextract gummies that come with the course. So you're not only getting the physiological effects of having, getting more juicy and flirty and turned on. I had a wet dream with the products without doing anything. And in conjunction with the course, which are going to guide people into introductory Tantra with your partner in union, then, I think that's going to be very powerful for couples to be able to do at home. And so that's coming out in a couple weeks. We're launching. And so people can contact me to do that, to get the emails about that at hightantra.com, hightantra@gmail.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Zipporah.thehighpriestess. And I'm also offering one-on-one virtual sessions for my High Tantra coaching that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, of doing a virtual coaching ceremony, 90 minutes. And we'll talk about whatever your limiting blocks are, beliefs, whatever goals you have, and incorporate it into the coaching session in a very magical way, mystical.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. So excited to be connected and eager to highlight your continued work.
Thank you so much for having me.